I never claimed to be perfect. I never said I was a savior. There is nothing that makes me different or better than you. I'm no better than you or anybody. Whatever I have done in this life, anyone else could have done the same thing.
True Afro. Third actor, just say Afro, aka the whiner.
X's life was tragically taken too early and hurt many fans, and even though it's already been 4 years, his pain is still felt. How did a kid who was kicked out of almost every school he attended and had multiple juvenile arrests become the most impactful artist of an entire generation? For this, we have to go back to 1998. Jahseh Onfor was born January 23, 1998 in Plantation General Hospital in Florida. His parents, Dwayne and Cleopatra, had given birth to a healthy boy, but he was diagnosed early on with atrial septal defect, also known as a hole in the heart. This is actually pretty common. Doctors just advised he never played too rough. He spent the first year of his life living with his dad and his half-sister, Ariana. Ariana watched Jahseh grow up firsthand and knows more about his early childhood than most. She published videos going into detail about his upbringing, but for unknown reasons the videos have all been deleted. But this is what we do know.
Always been empty. It'll always be empty. It's a big problem. It's like a void nobody can fill.
After being born, his parents had already separated. He would visit between both his mom and dad's homes until settling in with his dad at 36th Street, West Palm Beach. Although he was living at his dad's house, he spent most of his time there with Ariana and her mom while his dad was away working. Dwayne and Ariana said when Jahseh was little, he always wanted the attention to be on him. He would cry until someone picked him up and then go quiet. Although this is completely normal for an infant to do, this would foreshadow the troubled upbringing and behavioral patterns to come. Sometime in 1998, Jahseh's dad had an affair with another woman, giving birth to a third child under a third mother. It was only a few months after this video was filmed that Tashna would call off their relationship. She called Cleopatra, Jahseh's biological mom, and asked her to come pick up her son. They met at a gas station nearby, and from here forward, things were never easy. Dwayne and his half-sister Ariana remained in his life, but under the new living conditions, he mostly only saw them on weekends. Jahseh was now staying in Pompano Beach with his mom. His mom was single, working as a stripper, and couldn't always take care of Jahseh. This meant he would spend a lot of times with various babysitters, or even his uncle. This eventually grew problematic as Jahseh was known to need a lot of attention, and when his mom was home with him, she often brought men with her and gave little to no attention to him.
My mom just had me, she was in a situation where, she wanted me around, but she couldn't afford to.
She tried to take care of him the best she could, but was dealing with her own problems. Cleopatra always assumed if he had clothes, food, and a place to stay, she was providing everything he needed, but fell short of giving him the attention he deserved. This is partially the reason he felt like an outcast and had very little real friends. He always felt like he wasn't good enough. But people always respected or feared him. Jahseh never liked bullies and he would stand up to them whenever he got the chance, whether it was for himself or other people, he didn't care. However, around 7 years old, a few significant events happened that really affected his view of the world. This is where things get interesting and you really start to understand why he was the way he was. We mentioned before that Jahseh was sometimes babysat by his uncle after school, and sometimes he would stay over for days at a time. Unfortunately, his uncle was known to suffer from depression, and because of this, he often had outbursts. Sometimes during these incidents, he would take it out on Jahseh, getting physical with him, and because he was so young, he didn't understand why this was happening. One day while Jahseh was at school, his uncle had another outburst. This time, nobody was around to take it out on, so unfortunately, he took the anger out on himself. When Jahseh returned home from school that day, he was the first person to discover his uncle hanging from the balcony. Seeing this traumatized him and fed his own anger and depression more. Just a few months after this, something else would also happen. A man who was selling drugs and seeing his mother at the time was in their home, and an argument between Cleopatra and him started. Arguing wasn't too uncommon in the house, but after Jahseh heard the dishes being broken in the kitchen, he came out of his room. He then witnessed the man getting physical with his mom as the argument grew out of hand. Jose claims the man would have killed his mom if he didn't do something. He ran, grabbed a piece of broken glass and jumped on him, biting and cutting him until he left. Although he protected his mom, she became concerned at the same time. This was the first major outburst he had, and it made her realize she needed to pay more attention to him in case he behaved that way again. Over the next few years, as he was transitioning out of elementary school, he would increasingly hate being home while she was away. He dreaded going there just to be alone, but he loved his mom and always went out of his way for her attention. In his own words, he chased her, and over again, Cleo fell short of her promise to give Jose the attention he needed from her. Meanwhile this is happening, Jose's dad was the only other person he could get that care from. He remained active in his life, but mostly only saw him on the weekends at this point. But even that came to an end. Around 2008, his dad would run into some trouble with the law. He met a man who was interested in buying weed in bulk from him. Dwayne and a few others agreed to sell the man 800 pounds, but what they didn't know was a full surveillance team was doing an investigation on the entire process. It was revealed the man was an undercover DEA agent, and they seized over 500 pounds of weed, with Dwayne and 7 others being arrested. The trial would last until mid-2009 when he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for money laundering, conspiracy, and drug trafficking. Jose's dad was a prominent figure in his life who provided stability, and just like that, he was gone. At the time, Jose was attending Margate Middle School. It wasn't the best school in the area, but it was the perfect place for his rage that was building up. He spent a lot of time online with the laptop he got for Christmas, just talking and interacting with people, sometimes playing video games to distract himself. But when he wasn't playing Xbox or PlayStation, he was getting into fights. This became a regular thing, causing him to be expelled from schools. His mom would argue with him about things like this because she wanted him to be great academically and go on to better things. But Jose knew that wouldn't come from school or being a well-behaved student. He is what he is because of himself, and he didn't want to keep hiding it. His mindset started to change, and his appearance as well. The way he dressed and acted was unique to him and represented how he felt better. In the 7th grade, he was forced to start at a new school. Although he considered himself an outcast, he was always able to attract and meet people like himself, so making friends wasn't too hard for him. He was friendly unless you gave him a reason not to be, he said. The only subject he actually enjoyed in school was history class. Everything else just led to more fights. There was something about fighting that he loved. He liked fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, but also for the thrill it gave him. Admittedly, he sometimes fought just because he knew when he went home, his mom would be forced to give him attention after.
I chased her. I remember I used to beat at school just to hear my mom yell at me or talk to me.
Over the years, this became too stressful for Cleo, and she started leaving him with his aunt or friends for extended periods of time because she couldn't handle it.
Okay, so you vote.
When his aunt saw that he had interest in music, she convinced him to perform in the church choir. But at one of the recitals, once again, he fought one of the band members who Jose said was bugging him and beat another kid with a pair of drumsticks. His outbursts were taking a toll on everyone around him. When he was finishing the 8th grade and going into high school, his mom would officially kick him out. He says at this time he was drifting homeless and felt lost with no direction in life. Eventually, he went to live with his grandma, Colette Jones, in a community called the Isles of Inverry. The neighborhood was popular for drug dealing and gang activity. Here, he met and liked hanging out with the older kids. But his grandma was very religious. She woke up for church on Sundays and had a strict curfew. If he didn't make it home, the door would be locked, so he avoided staying here as much as he could. He bounced around a lot, sleeping at different friends' houses and only went home when he needed to. His depression and anxiety were getting the best of him. He started selling weed and experimenting with drugs like Xanax and Vicodin to numb himself, but these were small problems compared to what was coming. In late 2012, when Jose was 14, he was stopped by officers one night, and they found 21 grams of weed on him. He was charged with a felony and sentenced to 1 month in juvenile detention and 6 months in a correctional facility. Just 1 month after completing these obligations, he was arrested and locked up again, this time for breaking into a home with a few others to steal laptops, unknowing at this time that this single event would actually turn out to be a blessing in disguise and change the course of his entire life.